Afternoon, and welcome to our second parallel breakout sessions of the day. And the topic for this one is preparing you through vocational skills training. It's a topic that's been touched on in the overview by Anne, as well as in our plenary panel. And we're lucky enough to have two of the same panelists join us. So Sabelo Buthelezi from the Department of Higher Education and Training, and Anthony Giva from the National Business Initiative. We're hoping to be able to go into a few more practical examples in this session, as it's more of a deep dive, and also to provide the opportunity for you as delegates to ask questions. Please do use the Q&A facility next to your video, and I'll be taking questions after the opening statements. We also have Makana Marajela from APSA and Sherry Donaldson from Harambee. So I think a lot has been said already about vocational education. I think Anne kicked off with a contentious start, saying that our system is very expensive and not working. And so in this session, we want to kind of unpack what can we do to make it work, what practical examples can corporates and non-profits do in terms of advancing vocational skills education in the country. There is a poll for this session, so if you go to the poll tab, we've asked which further education interventions by business do you think are most important. So if you can vote and submit your votes, we will be tracking that, and I'll bring it up in a little while for the panelists to discuss. But we've heard from the two gentlemen on the panel, so I'm going to start with Makana, as we haven't yet had a corporate talk on this issue. And I would like to hear from you in your opening statement how you think corporates can best contribute. It's actually the same as the poll question. How can corporates best contribute to vocational skills training? And what is APSA doing in this regard?
Thank you, Kathy. I reflected a bit on the question, and I realized that perhaps it could unwittingly reinforce what I believe is the very issue that we need to challenge. And I'm saying this because often when we ask the question that you have posed, which quite frankly it could apply to any other social partner, whether you're government or organized labor, the tendency is to just focus or think narrowly about that individual contribution. And I think this is a critical point, because when you look at the complexity of youth unemployment, the scale that we need to achieve, and the state of readiness of vocational education and training, and all this against the backdrop of an expanding world of connectivity, a weak economy, and the far-reaching effects of COVID-19, and quite importantly, in my mind, what is a growing realization that a new normal, what has become our new normal, has got to be a better normal. And therefore, this suggests to me that we need to have a new set of relationships. I think I listened with keen interest in the previous session about the change in the discourse. And I think it's important that we look at new relationships where collaborative efforts actually think about skills development in an integrated and holistic fashion, where I think skills development really sits at the heart of industrial policy, where skills development really forms part of the many master plans that we have seen. I think we tend to see skills development kind of almost as an afterthought once we've put together the master plans. And I think it's also important to locate skills development as part of, as I said, as part of the master plan, but also beginning to understand what are the different pieces of the economy, the moving pieces of the economy, as well as the institutional arrangements needed, I think, to achieve this big question of addressing youth unemployment. And I think for me, this is really an important context. Otherwise, we run the risk of literally throwing contributions that really don't give us any traction whatsoever. But importantly, this kind of framework, for me, means that corporates have got to see themselves as strategic partners beyond just funders or donors to support programs. They've got to see themselves as strategic partners. And I think a question that should be uppermost our minds all the time is the fact that who are we doing this for? Because sometimes we get sidetracked about the contribution, forgetting that actually there's a young person at the end of that, or at the end of that line. So it's important for corporates to really take note of the fact that their success is dependent on young people being economically active. And I think also locating skills development in the industrial policy and the master plans really works as it enables corporates to begin to identify demand in a far more clearer and targeted fashion. It enables corporates to give sufficient detail that will enable the providers to put together programs that respond to demand. I do want to hasten to flag the issue here that I think it's important to avoid training narrowly for jobs. We find ourselves in a career flux where things are moving and shifting all the time, and therefore being able to balance basic skills together with transferable skills is absolutely important. I think we heard about in the previous panel about the credentialing, but I think that has got to be balanced with the transferable skills. And the shift in terrain also means that we need strong institutions. And I think corporates can contribute, and in fact we have seen good examples where corporates have worked together with public entities to strengthen the leadership capability of these institutions, because we do need leaders and institutions that are strong, that are agile, leaders that can identify or even preempt or anticipate opportunities. As well, I think, Kathy, it's the whole renewal of career guidance. And I think we need career guidance that is informed by the labor market and that takes into account the vocational and academic pathways that are available out there. The last point in my opening is really around what perhaps is commonly known, the practice across it's workplace-based learning, even though one has to say that it is, I think the quality of workplace-based learning and the success of workplace-based learning varies quite considerably. I do, however, want to flag the point that for corporates, it's important for them to understand that workplace-based learning there are different types of it, and it's for different purposes. And therefore, how they prepare and guide young people, support, nurture, coach, assess these young people is critically important. Often what is missing with a workplace-based learning, where I think corporates can play a meaningful role, is providing the feedback loops to the education providers. Because otherwise we tend to see it as a linear process where candidates get into workplaces and after completion then they disappear either in jobs or sometimes some of them don't end up in jobs. So the feedback loops are absolutely important because they keep a check on the quality that the providers have to maintain. Related to that point is also, I think, a matter relating to data. We need to be able to generate the data from workplace learning so that we understand where learning leads to jobs, as a result of workplace-based learning, and also where learning has failed to lead to jobs. And I think the data issue for me is important, because that's the only way we can track and be able to improve on our provision. It strikes me that here, even with workplaces, we really need to be looking at where the new opportunities are. It strikes me that when you look at the trade testing for artisans, employers, including the colleges or the college lecturers, are not involved in the phase assessments of the candidates, as well as in the assessment of these candidates. And I think if you run from the point of demand, or employers being involved in demand or influencing demand, I don't see why they couldn't be involved in the assessment at this trade test to make sure that the candidates are tested to the skills that are required in industry. And as APSA, we really invested quite heavily in young people, and we have taken really the continuum of working or supporting young people from grade 8, where they start to choose their careers, as well as supporting them through a work readiness program. We run a big Ready to Work initiative, which is quite successful, as well as supporting matriculants as they prepare to transition into higher education. There is research to confirm that many of these candidates miss out, particularly those from rural communities, miss out entry into university simply because they didn't apply on time or they didn't use the correct forms in their applications. We also support a range of programs that are focusing on unemployed youth, as well as running a big program on universities, scholarships at university level, which has really shown a great success. I mean, I do have to point here that we're beginning to get into the area of teacher development, particularly looking at teacher development models that are school-based, that really make sure that teachers do not just know the theory of teaching, but can actually teach successfully. So for us, it's important to understand that continuum from choosing subjects right up to the point where these young people can get into jobs.
Thank you, Mekano. I think that's really a useful way of looking at it, that the role of corporates can start early at the education level. Obviously, career guidance is so vital, through to supporting vocational skills training. And importantly, you focused on workplace learning as well, which companies have a huge role in delivering and providing data on. That question is going to take me, switching order a bit here, but I wanted to follow up with Sabelo, because you mentioned firstly that the system is so complex, the issue is so complex, and really requires strategic partnerships. Sabelo, in the plenary panel, you spoke about the department's centers of specialization. I just want to go a little bit further into that for our corporates and non-profits that are listening. Could you provide an example of one of those, and also speak to how does a company get involved with the department? How do they work with the department in a center of specialization or on the vocational education?
Basically, a center of specialization, it's a faculty or a department within a TVET college that has been established purposefully to provide the skills that are needed by the industry in partnership with the industry. What is key, what my panelists have also just said there, is also this disjuncture of not involving the industry in all what the college has done, but what these centers of specialization are starting to do in terms of phase assessment. They've started developing phase assessment, and some of those phase assessment, we have went to the industry and say the TVET college have trained these apprentices on fitting and turning. Please assist in setting a face assessment so that it talks to what you need as an industry. And that integration, and we have these mentors from the industry that are working with these young people from the start of the program, that are constantly giving feedback and say, yes, I've received this my apprentice back, but I was expecting that you should have covered this area and that area during the course of training. So there is already an interaction between the industry that are participating. So we have started small. There are only 26, but they are spread across all provinces. Some provinces having more than the others. But we want to talk about it as a model, not only as something that only talks to the 13 occupations that are in high demand that we are already doing. But we want to create a model that will ensure that at the college, the industry is sitting there, is sitting at this reference committee and is driving, which is basically coming there, critical issues, the issues of curriculum. What should be taught? How should it be taught? What are the skills that as an industry we need? Because we believe that colleges cannot do it by themselves, and the industry can't do it by itself. So this collaboration, this strategic partnership is key for the industry to drive the process so that we don't wait till the person qualifies after 3 years, 4 years, and then you say this person is poorly qualified. It's not addressing what we need, and then he remains unemployed. But we want to say, on a quarterly basis, tell us when the person comes there, they should be there. Also, that start allowing facilitators at the TVET colleges to visit the industry so that they upgrade their skills as well. They know what is happening at the industry. They don't just do something at a college that the industry is training something that is not, or either outdated or that is not the requirement of the industry. So we need to take this as a model and expand it to other occupation, to short programs and so on, so that we create this trust. We reduce the trust deficit between this institution and what the industry need. Because when we start, we realize there's a very big trust gap between what the TVET college as institutions can provide and what the employers expect. But when we then bring the employers to the other side and say, tell us, be at the driving seat, and let's say move towards to get at the same. So the feedback that we are currently getting is quite, those employers that are participating are quite happy with the kinds of the apprentices that they are getting, and also the participation that they are able to influence the curriculum. It's not only about the financial support, but they should be able to influence the curriculum at the TVET college and how it should be rolled out to the benefit of them as the industry and to the benefit of young people.
Thank you, Sabelo. I think that's a useful message just in terms of working with industry, again, across the spectrum. So from curriculum, financial support, through to assessments of students and apprentice work experiences as well. I'm going to go to Sherry now and ask about Harambee's model and how Harambee is involved in vocational training and what results you have found.
Okay, thanks. So most people will know Harambee because of our Ready to Work or Close the Gap program and the leverage of that Ready to Work to get young people into opportunities. And over our 9 years, we have placed or supported over 180,000 young people into various opportunities, which is a lot. But if you look at the scale of unemployment, especially amongst youth in South Africa, actually it's nothing, and we need to just be doing so much more. So Harambee has been looking at our strategy and to see what it is that we want to be doing and where we can really play a very active role and deliver on scale. So that's a big part of the pivot that we've been undergoing. And as part of that, we're supporting the Presidential Youth Initiative with the platform sayouth.mobi, which will aggregate all opportunities for work, for learning, or as many opportunities as possible, let's rephrase that, for work, for learning, for earning, that kind of hustle that Cobain referred to earlier, and collate all of those and then provide online learning functionality, including, hopefully, we're busy piloting, the ready-to-work solution. And our objective with that is to enable as many young people in the country to get access to those solutions rather than just the people that can get to us. And that sayouth.mobi platform will be data-free for young people as well. And we'll also add other online learning functionality as we go as well. So that's really the work that we're moving in towards and moving Harambee towards. But as part of that, we've also recognized that we need to be doing other stuff differently. Again, kind of creating an opportunity for 10 people does make a difference. But if we can create an opportunity for 100,000 people, that makes substantial impact from a country point of view. So our work in the technical vocation space is really following on from the successes Harambee has had with BPESA, which is the call center industry association, Business Process Enabling South Africa, to not use the acronym. And really our work there started in call centers, and that industry association, supporting that industry body with resources, with funding, with admin where necessary, and various piloting of various projects for growth in the industry firstly, and secondly for inclusive employment. And we have really over-delivered on our targets in that space. So what we're wanting to do is to see, can we replicate a BPESA type of situation into other industries? And BPESA itself is already moving into what they're calling globally traded business services, which will encompass digital skills. And Harambee has assisted in research, what are those entry-level digital jobs? And then we're about to launch our Digital Center of Excellence, which is skilling and training for those entry-level jobs, hopefully for absorption into those specific call centers and other opportunities. So we've already kind of leveraged the BPESA relationship into additional fields and into technical, but we're now looking, well, how can we use those learnings into artisan-type technical skills? So where are those industries that have potential for scale, where there is demand, and where we can leverage some systemic changes to actually deliver on some of those objectives? So we're working predominantly in two areas at the moment. The first one is in plumbing, and we have quite an advanced relationship with the Plumbing Industry Association and their registration body as well. And there's a few challenges that we're exploring in terms of how we support challenges in the industry and how do we support in terms of overcoming those. So there are, according to the Industry Association, 15,000 trade-tested qualified plumbers in the country. But in recent research by TIPS and GIZ, 120,000 plus people identified as plumbers. So there's a big gap.
Sure.
All right. So the challenge is, if you're not a registered qualified plumber, your hourly rate is less. You can't issue a certificate of compliance, which is also a billable item in your arsenal of billing, let's put it that way. You can't take advantage of CETA programs because you're not registered, accredited. You don't necessarily have the right people to support apprenticeship training, for example. You can't mentor because you're not qualified. And so there's all these challenges that come into play. So our theory is that if we can unblock the pipe, as our plumbing guys call it, if we can unblock the pipes, what can we do? So we're busy funding a project with our OPSO, the Industry Association, about to start soon, where we will test that theory. If we RPL 50 people with them, what happens to those people? Do they move out and start their own enterprises? Do they earn more? Can they employ more people because they've now got more income? Okay. And what happens to those people? We also are working on a couple of other projects with the plumbing industry. One is about women in plumbing and trying to address some of the gender inclusion issues in plumbing. And then another one, and it links to the points Sabelo and Makano have made already, is around plumbing in schools. How can we support the civil services, I think it's called, curriculum in schools, which actually encompasses a huge amount of plumbing. So if we can support the teachers, if we can provide workplace vacation opportunities for those students, use some online mechanisms to support both the teachers and the students, what happens? Can we leverage and can we get those students into opportunities straight away as they finish school? And then also we're working with the Public-Private Growth Initiative on water and sanitation and war on leaks projects, and then also working with NBI on some of their skilling programs around technical skills training into work experience.
Thank you, Sherry. Interesting to hear how Harambee has shifted like everyone to the digital, so with your new aggregating platform and your online training, and also taking your experience from call centers across to other industries. On the note of working with NBI, I'm going to go over to Anthony. I think you gave a nice example in the plenary, so I'm actually going to pose some of the questions that are coming in already to you. And you, a business membership body, and one of the questions is, how are we going to get a more coordinated approach to TVET in South Africa? So it's a tough one. And there's another one which I think you can also address given the program examples you've provided. But how do we get artisans to a level where they are highly skilled and we can start employing local welders, for example, in the major infrastructure projects that are planned for South Africa?
You might have to remind me.
I can remind you.
But I do think, yes, it is a complex environment. It's a complex ecosystem, this skills and TVET environment. And it's largely because it's very fragmented. So we've spoken already about the challenges around TVET colleges, and I think Sabelo has alluded to a lot of those sort of challenges around the disconnect between what TVET colleges are providing and what industry is looking for broadly. So that's, and I think that's an accepted situation that we've been going on and on about for the last couple of decades without any resolution. So there's that disconnect that at a broad level. When you bring it down to a sectoral level now, and I think that's linking to what Makano is saying, is that disconnect plays out in different ways in different sectors, right, depending on the structure of the sector. So in your high-end manufacturing, your advanced manufacturing, it's a different type of disconnect because you can use your centers of specialization as a way to bring colleges closer to industry, because they can provide those kinds of high-end artisanal skills for our whatever we want to call it in terms of advanced manufacturing, and you can invest a lot of money in doing that, and that's what the DHET is doing. And I think industry is coming to the party to some extent in certain sectors to enable that to happen. But in other sectors, it's a little bit more complex. If we take plumbing as a perfect example of, and as a counterpoint to Sherry's input, is that in the plumbing industry, you're dealing with a large number of SMEs, right? So it's a much more broad base of industries that you're looking at, and many of them are quite small. And many of them are not employing large numbers. So the 125,000 that we're talking to, we don't know how many of those are actually really qualified plumbers or experienced plumbers. Many of them are just working in plumbing. I mean, and they get categorized as plumbing. We think that there's a large number of them that are actually just come off the street, landed in plumbing businesses because of the very sort of referral systems and whatever that we spoke about earlier, and have been trained sort of on the job in a very ad hoc way and have no recognition whatsoever. So they really don't have any kind of job security, and they're quite vulnerable and precarious in that regard. So the question is, how do we formalize the skills and recognize the skills of larger numbers of young people in the industry, but at the same time create more structured pathways into those businesses? So that's about working at a more aggregated level to try and reach a broader number of small businesses that we can kind of mobilize, that we can support, and that we can, from the ground up, grow the skills base and formalize the skills base. And this is where your TVET college system becomes quite critical. Because on the one hand, you can upskill young people, and I'm not talking specifically around trade testing and artisan, I'm talking even just around young people who are working on the back of a bakkie in a plumbing business, going out to site, doing whatever, unblocking drains and whatever it is. How can you upskill them and get them to a level so that they can be recognized not necessarily as a plumber per se, but even as a plumbing assistant, so they're giving them some formal recognition. And at the same time creating more structured pathways into those jobs, because that's where the jobs are. So I think it's going to be very different across different sectors in terms of your approach, and how you work with different stakeholders and bring them together. So in a sector like plumbing and in many other industries, and I think alluding to that TIPS research, there's many industries that fall into that same sort of category of lots and lots of SMEs. So you have to work at an aggregated level with a large number of SMEs and work from the ground up to build the skills pipeline. And that leads into, I think, what your sort of second question was around, now how do you get them to that higher level of skill? And I think that's where the challenge is, because there's quite a leap from where they are now to get to that level. And yes, we can RPL some of them if they've got enough experience and they've got the right kind of training, and we can get them trade tested, and that will apply for a certain number. But there's quite a big gap between the large number at the base of the pyramid who are working in these sectors, right, with very low levels of skill or semi-skilled or informal skills that they've learnt on the job, and getting them to a point where they're highly skilled. So what we have to do is to start building the pipeline. We have to start growing the pipeline from the base, because this is about inclusion. And the challenge that we have at the moment, and with all due respect, and I'm not attacking the centres of specialisation by any means. I think we need artisans, there's no doubt. And we need centres of specialisation, there's no doubt. But the challenge that we have in the moment is that it's not an inclusive model, because there's only very few young people that are ever going to get into those opportunities. And when it's industry driven, it's going to be really inaccessible for large numbers of our marginalised youth who come from township communities who don't have access to the networks, as Sherry said, that will give them into those opportunities. So we need to create the opportunities where they live, which means we need to be working with artisanal businesses in the townships, in the villages, and really growing the pipeline of skills organically that way, right? So we can be more inclusive. And only once we start lifting that base will we get to a point where we can grow high-level skills, because it's pointless just doing it for the few, and we're never going to change the structure of the labour market if we do it that way. There has to be a more inclusive approach. It has to build the base in a much more dynamic, much more responsive and much more agile way from the bottom up, which requires working across your SMEs, right, or your micro and small businesses in these various types of industries. And it's not exclusive to plumbing, it's across a range of industries. Building that skills base in a recognizable way through your kind of agile skills, through your, your stackable skills, your micro-credentialing, whatever fancy term we want to use around it, these days, and then helping them to grow from there. But we're not going to tack it by coming in from the top end and just growing this narrow pool of highly skilled young people who are quite exclusive and quite exclusionary, and expect that that's going to solve our youth unemployment crisis.
Thanks, Anthony. So I think you've reiterated that we need different approaches for different sectors as well as different models. So there's the role of university, the role of TVET colleges, and then what you're talking about, meeting people where they're at and building from the ground up. I've got time for one more question, so we're going to finish up with you, Sibelo. It's a question, and I think it relates to a word Anthony's just used many times. That's come from one of the delegates, and it's around, is TVET agile enough to respond to industry needs in real time? So you're building these centres of specialisation, but how responsive can you be to the needs of industry as things change?
The truth, Katie, it's as they are, the TVET colleges are not responsive. Hence, the centres of specialisation has been one way of making them to be responsive. And we should also admit that it cannot be the only way. We need a multi-pronged approach that will look on a number of areas that will look on how do we get masses of people that are semi-skilled, that we need just to build a bit of their skills. That might, some of them can do some form of jobs, but they really don't even have enough requirements or access to enter into these apprentice programs and move into higher levels. But they can do a certain level of jobs. How do we bring that? So we need to then broaden the base. So what is just a model that we need to still work and find a way of saying, how do we build up and move it? Because it's true and it's accepted that TVET colleges, as they are currently structured, they are not responsive. And centers of specialization is one part. It cannot be the only way of addressing unemployment, poverty, and the challenges or structural challenges that we are having. But we'll need to engage with the small businesses, with big businesses. That partnership between the government and the private sector is key, so that we understand how do we do that, because government does not sit with all the answers. If we think we have the answers, we are making a big mistake. And also industry on the other side, if they sit on the side and not get to the to this process and say, this is how we can be able to assist, use institutions like Harambee and say, how do we as a collective assist so that we identified skills at different levels so that we are able to build up. I think that's what there's the way.
Thank you, Sabelo.
One last
One quick comment.
I think just linking to that and what you said is that the key thing is, how do we make the system work for SMEs? So at the moment it doesn't. How do we make it conducive for SMEs to train young people? SMEs are typically not incentivized to train through our current skills development system. And we need to unlock that. We need to create more effective, more broad-based, workplace-based learning environments across our SME environment. And that's the only way that we're really going to broaden the access.
Thank you. And I think that links to the plenary panel, where it was to make it easier for SMEs to employ youth as a starting point, and now also to provide skills and training. Time seems to have flown, and I'm afraid we're out of time, but our panelists have been gracious enough to agree to go to the networking lounge after this. So please, I see there's a lot more questions on the chat. Please do meet them in the networking lounge to continue this conversation. But I'd like to just now thank our four panelists, Sabelo, Anthony, Makana, Sherry. Thank you for your contributions. It's been great. I think we've packed a lot of examples and insights into a very short time. And yeah, we'll see you in the networking room. Thanks.
Perfect. Kathy, thank you so much, as well as to the panelists who are about to make their way off stage. But we still have a lovely giveaway that we will be sharing with you as our panelists are on stage, and they will remain here very briefly as we prepare to go to the networking as well as the tea break. But as you've come to know, the platform today does allow you not only to interact, but also to win some fantastic prizes. We had some winners during lunchtime, and we're going to have winners now yet again. And again, the prize that we're giving away is an NPO listing on the Trilog Business in Society Handbook and on the Trilog Knowledge Hub worth 3,500 Rand. So we want you to get out your phones, get out to the platforms that you're viewing on, and make your way into the chat service, where we're going to quickly view and select some of the winners of these 3 questions that are raised and have been brought up from conversations that took place slightly earlier today after the lunch session specifically. So we've got 3 questions for you. We're looking for fast fingers and of course some sound knowledge to hear and see how much attention you were paying. The first question that we're going to ask: what annualized GDP growth rate released in September did Busisiwe refer to? What annualized growth rate, GDP growth rate released in September, did Busisiwe refer to? The second question is, how many people are unemployed in South Africa according to Anne Bernstein? How many people are unemployed in South Africa according to Anne Bernstein? And the last question, how many work opportunities has Yes for Youth created according to Tashmia Ismail Saville? How many work opportunities have been created according to Yes for Youth? Quickest fingers first, we are updating our apps to make sure that we're seeing who the right winners are. If it takes a little longer, as I said earlier, there were some technical gremlins in the system. We will give you an update as to who those winners are at the end of lunchtime. But we're looking for the first responses to those specific questions, and the winners will then win the package of the NPO listing in the Trilog Business and Society Handbook and on the Trilog Knowledge Hub worth 3,500 Rand. Kathy, I'm trusting you. You're my right-hand woman here today. Technology is failing me slightly.
Let's announce them in the closing.
We'll let them linger longer. Perfect. So we'll let you linger longer, and for the moment allow you to have a quick 20-minute tea break. And of course, this allows you to network, to interact, and maybe even stretch out your legs before you get PC fatigue. But we'll be back again at 20 minutes after 4 o'clock, where we will wrap up today's particular conference. But most importantly, we encourage you to continue interacting, sharing your views and feedback on social media, and of course, get networking.